I've got to bring up the agenda first, please. And it's just a question on the consent items, so it'll be real simple for somebody to answer. I've got it up. I think it was more on 6.1. Not to talk anything about that. I did see something else that you put out this afternoon. Maybe Gerald, that was what we were going to pay them for watching over it for us. So,
yeah, I'll let Chris come up. Chris worked out the agreement, and it's a very satisfactory agreement in my opinion, but he can tell you the specifics.
Thank you, sir. I presume you're asking about the monitoring agreement with the Osage Nation.
yes, that's correct. Thank you.
As we are, we're traveling through, we're digging through the Osage mineral estate in Osage County. And as such, there are some of those lands are allotted to Native Americans, and the tribe who owns that mineral estate has the right to ask to monitor as we go through certain areas of their allottees' lands during construction. And so this agreement says that, yes, we will do this. These are the procedures that we'll use to include how we will reimburse them for the cost, and then also in the event we find a cultural resource, what we'll do.
All right, thank you. That's all, Mayor.
Okay, any others? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to item 3, study items 3.1. Present a methane gas solution for the landfill.
Thank you, sir. As you recall from about a year and a half ago, we were given notice by DEQ that we had a little extra methane that we needed to deal with that was off gassing out of the landfill. We hired CSC to help us with that solution, and as we were progressing to that solution, they came to us with an opportunity to team, where they will team with another company to trap, treat, and sell that gas to One Oak, and part of that agreement is a little bit of royalties for us. So Wade with CSC would like to begin the conversation.
Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity to come present to you this afternoon. As he alluded to, my name is Wade Miller. I'm with SCS Engineers, and we're presenting to you some remedial options associated with the methane exceedances and gas probe 6-7 at the landfill. Our presentation will consist of 4 major points. Point 1 being our qualifications of our project team, which consists of SCS Engineers and Spark Natural Gas. I'll also provide you some landfill background based upon the history we have there at the site, other remedial efforts we've done as well as the 2 remedial options, and then also provide a summary to you. Just to give you the background of SCS Engineers, we started in 1970, so we've been in operation for 50 years at this point in time. We also at this point have roughly 900 employees at 70 offices throughout the U.S. Those employees consist of engineers, scientists, geologists, and other professionals. What SCS does, we're primarily solid waste. Landfill work is what we do primarily. We specialize in providing comprehensive solid waste services to private community, to local government, as well as private entity firms. We also specialize in biogas tactics we're promoting today with the potential landfill gas to energy project there on site. We've designed and constructed approximately 50 biogas projects throughout the U.S. We've also operated and maintained a little over 30 biogas projects. Give Norman the Spark a little opportunity to present his qualifications with Spark Natural Gas.
Gentlemen, we appreciate your time today. Good afternoon. You'll hear from us both in this joint presentation a little bit about Spark. Spark was founded in 2013, and we operate a network of compressed natural gas fueling stations. Many of our largest customers are municipalities through the form of public-private partnerships. in Lawton, Oklahoma, Moore, Oklahoma, El Reno, Garden City, Kansas. Today, we're here to present to you an infrastructure project that ties in three main things: a gas collection and control system designed by SCS engineers, gas upgrading and conditioning technology that would take methane gas and make it pipeline quality gas, and then finally an interconnection pipeline to ONEOK. So today we are evaluating agriculture projects, wastewater treatment projects, landfill projects. We recently completed the same conversation with the city of Sallisaw in eastern Oklahoma, and we'll be in front of the city of Lawton in the same capacity to develop those landfills as well. So excited to be doing business in your community, and you'll hear more from me throughout the presentation. Thank you.
Just a little landfill background. The landfill was permitted back in the 1980s. We have approximately 54 acres that contains solid waste on it at this point in time. It's the waste footprint. We're regulated by the Oklahoma Department of Environmental Quality. And within those regulations, we're required to have a network of perimeter probes that are monitored on a minimum month or a quarterly basis to determine if there's methane migration at the facility. Probably back in 2017, we were brought on to develop a landfill gas remediation plan to address methane migration in GP6 and GP7, or excuse me, GP7 at that point. They're located on the south side of the landfill. And with that landfill gas remediation plan, we permitted and constructed 5 passive vents, which were installed near the toe of the landfill on the south side, near GP7, in an attempt to cut off the methane that was migrating off-site. Those passive vents were installed, and initially we did see a decrease in the methane concentration to fall within regulatory compliance. But then within a few more months, the methane levels began to increase to a point that we were out of compliance again. And the reason for installing those passive vents at that point in time, that was kind of a retro, kind of a step process, where if we ever needed to go back in and do something further, such as what we're proposing later on, pointing vacuum, we have the wells installed, where at that point we just have to apply vacuum to eliminate and prevent any type of potential methane migration. The ODEQ has since 17 has allowed City of Enid to monitor those 6 and 7, gas probes 6 and 7 on a monthly basis to determine if they're in compliance. Again, the methane levels have fluctuated over the years. And recently DEQ came to us and stated they would like for us to address the exceedances with another landfill gas remediation plan. Their deadline for this at this point in time is February of 2021. We've also had discussions with DEQ that City of Enid, as well as SCS and Spark Natural Gas, are evaluating a potential landfill gas energy project. So they have extended their initial deadline to this point, and we believe that with the discussions we're having today, and hopefully further discussions, we can request an extension to that February 2021 deadline for a landfill gas remediation plan. So one of our 2 options for landfill gas remediation is to take the existing 5 passive vents that we installed in 2017, connect those to a SVE blower skid, and have an HDPE piping system that carries that gas from passive vents, which would be converted to a soil vapor extraction system. We would then apply the vacuum, collect the landfill gas, and put it into the atmosphere. We would not destroy it through flame or anything of that nature, but in essence, with the minimal amount of methane that we anticipate, we just simply put it to the atmosphere. This estimated construction cost is approximately $223,000. It's what we developed based upon some initial plans we put together in 2019. We believe this option to be one, again, with retrofitting the existing passive vents, we can achieve environmental compliance with an estimated construction cost of the $223,000.
I had a question about your image on this slide. It's a little hard to see in the projector, but on the computer, the little red bubble is described as contamination. My understanding was that the methane is not so much a contamination, it's just a natural byproduct of the decomposition of whatever goes in the landfill. Am I misunderstanding that?
No, it is a natural decomposition, but from the regulatory standpoint, if it becomes off-site, it is considered to be contamination at that point in time. So our reference to contamination is we're trying to prevent the potential off-site migration of that methane.
Okay,
Because as it goes off-site, it becomes a regulatory issue.
sure.
And that's what we're seeing at this point in time, based upon the methane levels at GP7.
But there's nothing in the landfill that's not what we expect to be there, which is.
No, sir,
creating
there's
methane.
no,
Okay, that's what-
as we know, there's no unregulated hazardous waste.
Gotcha, thank you.
Option 2, which Spark Natural Gas, and that's what we're here today mostly to consider and discuss, would be to install an active landfill gas collection system, which would also be a landfill gas energy system. With that, we would install 51 extraction wells, which would be placed over the 54 acres of waste footprint that is currently at the site. We'd also, within those 51 extraction wells, connect that with the HDB piping system. From there, we would go to the blower station, which we're proposing to be located on the northeast side of the facility. We'll also have additional systems to treat and condense the landfill gas at that point in time before we transport it to the One Oak pipeline located on the north side of the property. The estimated construction cost of this system is a little over $2 million. The difference between this option and option 1 is that Spark Natural Gas is willing to incur that cost to construct and operate this system. So this system, this option 2, would be at no cost to the city of Enid. And in fact, you'd actually receive a royalty similar to an oil and gas royalty for the sale of the natural gas from this facility.
What, would this also include the future cell that we're in the process of permitting to the south?
Yes, sir. We can expand this system. What we'll do is have a proposed header system along the north side and the west side. And as the landfill begins to expand, we can expand our system based upon the existing infrastructure.
What's the lifespan of the system?
The current system, what we're proposing,
Yeah, the remedial option number 2, what's the proposed lifespan of it?
I mean, there's always going to be operation and maintenance of those facilities. I mean, similar to extraction wells, I mean, we see settlement all the time at landfills, which will also can cut those off to where we'll have to go in and re-drill those. But ultimately, the lifespan, I believe the initial agreement is 30 years is what they're looking at as an option with the city of Enid, with optionals to extend that 30-year agreement as well.
Do we own the infrastructure or do you own the infrastructure? The additional infrastructure for the remediation option number 2.
Option number 2, who owns the infrastructure?
Yeah. I mean, is it the city owns the infrastructure and the city's responsible for the ongoing maintenance thereof, or is this one of those where we are effectively leasing the underground exploration to you as a third party?
It'd be the latter, yeah. So
Okay.
The structure this would take on, it's a good segue, I think, to the next slide, I believe, which tells you the 3 parts of the project. So the way I would describe the project.
Up to the mic a little bit
Sure,
so we
sure.
can.
Yeah, so council member, the way the public-private partnership would operate would be that the infrastructure that's present, the collection system that SCS engineers designs and engineers the 51 wells, the gas upgrading and conditioning system, which takes a form of membrane technology or pressure swing absorption technology or wash technology or amine technology. All these technologies are out there to get raw gas that's from a landfill and treat it to pipeline quality gas, like the gas that would come to a home or to an industrial use. That technology would be owned by Spark. And then finally, that pipeline that would be in the ground that is abutting the South Gate and the South 16th Street would also be owned by Spark. So in some ways, yeah, the city's responsibility would be to maintain the landfill operations, bring municipal solid waste, bring in the occasional construction demolition waste, bring other organics that are high in methane content. Spark would be responsible for owning and operating through what would be designated a lease, easement, and gas rights agreement that you would lease in a 30-year term in exchange for a royalty. And the way that public-private partnership would work would be a relationship that would do a couple things. One, it would solve the compliance issues. Secondly, it would capture the methane that's naturally occurring today in the landfill. Thirdly, it would allow us to ensure that there is that investment through FTEs and through employees that would be managing the well field in a way that is tuning each individual well to the way that we're generating the most gas from each well itself. And then finally, the infrastructure build that happens through the gas connection and the royalty stream that would be owed to the city in a very transparent way, in the way that depending on how much gas is sold for the given month, multiplied by the NYMEX price of natural gas, would equal what the royalty amount would be. And visiting with the manager and staff, we would say that that number is conservatively a 6-digit $100,000 amount that the city would be able to enjoy based on the current landfill at its current amount of gas in place today, without any growth from future wells and future activity of growth. So when looking at the slide in front of you on the screen, again, Waze described the design there with the 51 collection wells with a main header pipe, perforated pipe, with a system of blowers and suction pressure, reverse suction pressure that then would send out to this plant that you see here. This is one example of a vendor and a manufacturer, ZBAC. We would look at a close amount of other companies and see and determine which one's going to provide the most efficiency of gas creation for the least amount of gas waste. And that's what we would go about and present to you in future briefings. B&H Construction is an operator that works closely with Oklahoma Natural Gas and with CenterPoint that builds over 400 employees building pipe all over the state. And they would be the ones on the property of the city connecting the pipeline. And finally, Spark would enter into a master service agreement with a third-party provider or with our own employees to manage the ongoing operations. We would allocate allowances for wells that are maybe run into accidentally, wells that need to be repaired, additional wells that'll be created to the landfill as your landfill expands. We would be responsible for all the back office, accounting, and bookkeeping, and we'd be the ones maintaining the relationship with Chris, Morali, and Angela on an ongoing basis, while also continuing the relationship the city currently has with SCS for all compliance. So all activities before ODEQ, all activities that require reporting would be continued with the current vendor that you're using today. In looking at a couple of the other additional slides, this is a good depiction. I have a hard copy in front of me. You should have the copy there on the screen. When looking at what our design contemplated, you see there that you have the east-west Southgate, the north-south, South 16th Street. And we're fortunate when you're looking at these landfills all across the country, like Spark's observing, sometimes you're out there 3 miles of pipe through congested residential area, 5 miles of pipe through a wooded area. Our pipeline in Salisaw, for instance, is a 2.5 mile pipe on city-owned property, but it's very, just dense vegetation. Here we're fortunate that you're on Southgate, and so is your main. Right there, our representatives from One Oak couldn't make it today, but they're going to be an active participant and partner in the project. They want to facilitate any questions from an engineering standpoint and show that they're accepting this renewable gas in other parts of the country. So there you have a 710 PSI line, a transmission line that we would be tying into. Then on the same city-owned property, we would allocate a portion of that land for the gas upgrading system and the technology, plus our compression. And then you would have the completion of the design for collection wells that would bring that gas to that point you see there, I'd say north and east of the landfill proper. Looking at the next slide here, this is another way of...
Before you go too far, I
Yes,
got
sir.
some questions.
Please, go ahead.
First off, do we pay gross production tax on this like we do on typical gas that we sell from an oil and gas well?
Gross production tax, this is a gathering system gathered from a point of collection to point of injection. So the way our structure reads in the agreement is a grossed up royalty, not a net royalty after taxes. So we would say that no, the city would not be responsible for paying taxes on that. That's the responsibility of Spark as the developer. We've seen structures on leases that you're on the net side or you're after all other issues of operation, you're a grossed up royalty, and that's the way the structure would read within the agreement.
So what is the city's net percentage on the gross production? What is that number?
Sure, yeah. So the current structure that we presented that will be reviewed by city attorneys is a 1875 royalty, a 3/16 royalty. A 3/16 royalty of all gas production arising from the landfill sent to the meter from One Oak would be what the royalty would be.
And the city has to pay no compression. You got to compress it pretty good to get it in a 750 PSI line.
We do, yeah. So our gas system likely has 200 to 150 PSI on the outlet. We would do a two-stage compressor to get up to the 760. Those electric rates would be ours to cover. That's part of our performa, as well as the actual part of the design. So on the skid itself, you'd have compression that takes the gas and boosts it to the 720.
But there's no surcharge to the city for that compression like we have to deal with in oil and gas field today.
No, sir. Yeah. So what we envision is that we would go and have a second meter, a second address, our payment of gas, of electric, of telephone, of internet, of all third parties of property, insurance, property tax. Those will all be the responsibility of the developer. So no, the answer would be compression is on our side, as well as the cost to compress on electricity, which would be falling to the developer at Spark.
What about the gas that's used in the compressor? There's a certain amount of gas that you're going to run that compressor with. Is that coming? Are we getting paid before you take that gas off or after?
You're getting paid before. So you're going to have the gas system needs a heating element, as you correctly point out. Our options there would be to have for our gas upgrading system to have a line from One Oak back to us, and then a recircled line of gas, of actual product gas that you would be responsible for your royalty.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And sir, maybe to follow up from an oil and gas experience, yeah, you have a valuable mineral below the ground. You're asking the developer to develop those at our cost. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, there's not a true dry hole. We know that there's gas in the landfill. We know that a collection system would capture that gas, and we know that with a high degree of certainty. So we're confident that we'll achieve the production rates that we estimate in our performance.
And I guess what I was getting at earlier that I think you kind of answered, but I just want to be very clear on, at no point will the city be responsible for the cost to repair or remediate the infrastructure itself. What, again, in a traditional oil and gas operation, we would think of, the cost to shut down the well, the whatever equivalent cost all falls on you. I just make sure the city doesn't get a bill in 15 years down the road because something's not working right and you have to replace all the perforated pipe and we're expected to pay a pro rata share, everything like that.
Sure, no, and council member, my answer to that would be no, that we would have budgetary allowances for wellheads, which is probably the one thing that has the most maintenance. That would be our responsibility. There's media associated with the gas upgrading technology that we would have on site. Spare parts would be our responsibility. Pipeline maintenance and call, Okie dig type approaches would be our responsibility. So we're co-located businesses, we're neighbors. The biggest responsibility for the city is to ensure that waste is in place, compaction is taking place, and as the landfill grows, we're communicating, so we're doing that communication for future cells. So there would not be a cost to the city.
Maybe a Gerald question if he's still floating around somewhere. Did Gerald want to? Chris, maybe you can answer this. Okay, that's fine. Would any deal we make with Spark have any impact on our ability to finance the construction of the additional landfill extension to the south? Presumably that we're going to have to do some, we can't pay that out of pocket. And I know that when we have looked at public-private partnerships on other infrastructure projects in the past, that's had some impact on our bonding capacity, or borrowing capacity rather. Do you know if this would have any implications to that end?
Definitively, no. But I think as we pen this agreement and we strictly limit it to the existing landfill, and therefore when we expand the landfill, we would have to modify this agreement. But specifically, no, not definitively. I cannot answer that question.
Okay, might be a good question to Carol to get John Wolf to look at, or whoever down there, Alan Brooks. I just want to make sure that we're not limiting our ability to get. I assume that's going to be a really expensive thing down the road, sometime in the next 5-10 years, ballpark. What's our timeline on that expansion?
You're going to approve a engineering services agreement tonight in consent to start that process of permitting that land to the south.
Right, but the actual construction's 5 years out?
at least.
Yeah, okay. During the term of this, anyway.
I've got a couple questions and I don't know.
I had one too. Is there any modification that we're going to have to make for operations in the landfill to accommodate that? Is there any process changes?
Yes, the facility, the landfill has a current Title V permit, air operating permit with the Oklahoma Department of Environmental Quality. We will be required to modify that air quality permit, operational permit. That will be one of Spark's incurred costs with this project as well. We'll also have to apply for a construction permit for the flaring and destruction, or because we'll also have a backup flare for this system in case we ever need to divert any of the gas and be destroyed through a flare. So we'll have both the construction permit to apply for as well as operational permit. Again, both of those permits will be at the cost of Spark Natural Gas.
Okay. And the landfill process that the city currently does, they won't have to modify their operations because of the system being installed?
No, sir.
Okay.
I mean, there will be some operational contingency, not really contingencies, but of course we'll have extraction wells on top of the landfill where when they're operating in the area, just have to be a little more cautious and more safety oriented to make sure, try to prevent any type of destroying any type of extraction well.
Okay. David?
Based on your past experience, I know that with oil and gas, that those wells, that their production really comes down after about 3 years. What's your experience with these? Does it maintain a level production amount, or do you see that drop off?
What we've seen with other landfills throughout the U.S., I mean, typically as long as the landfill is accepting waste, that landfill gas production is going to continue to increase. Once the landfill closes, we'll see it peak at that point in time, begin to exponentially decrease from thereafter. So as we anticipate this landfill, the current landfill, it's got 15, 20 years of estimated construction capacity. We're going to continue to see the landfill gas production increase for the next 15, 20 years. And at that point, for the existing facility, it would begin to decrease. But anticipating that, again, they're going to have expansion on the south side of the landfill, I would anticipate the gas production to decrease to a point that's it's not allowable for us to capture and utilize.
Okay. My next question, you said something about everything being on the northeast side of that property, if I heard that correctly. I know that there are some private homeowners down that direction. Is there any disruption to them as far as noise, odor, having to drill across their land, or are you going to have to get easements to do that? Can you speak to that, please?
The facilities we're looking at will be within the landfill property.
Right.
It will not be on the east side of the property as we speak. As you can see right there with their proposed location, it is roughly just north of the existing maintenance facility. So, and yes, we do not anticipate any type of increase in odors at the facility due to this process. We don't anticipate any type of safety or noise issues with the facility as well.
Yeah, my question about a noise, I know some compressors can be awfully loud. I mean, this is not going to be one of those, sounds like a jackhammer going 24 hours a day or anything like that, is it?
No, and really, it's at the end of the day, I mean, most of these, I mean, we're looking probably someone will be in the facility, and so you can control some of that noise by those type of facilities.
Cool.
Of course, all house mufflers and so forth that we can maybe look at retrofitting to reduce any potential noises that would have any impact on the neighbors.
And I don't want to give the impression that I'm like too deeply skeptical of this. This feels a little bit like one of those, you know, when something looks too good to be true, it probably is. So look really close kind of deals. I mean, this is one of those clearly solving a problem without having to pay something out of pocket and also making a little bit of cash is feels a little bit too good to be true. So I'm just looking at it extra close, but it does seem like a really positive deal for the city. I just want to make sure there's not some tail cost down the road that's going to catch us by surprise.
And I would say it does sound too good to be true, but it was SES. We've done this throughout the U.S. We've done it at multiple facilities. I mean, these type of agreements are very common. In fact, Spark's natural gas royalty of 3/16 is by far the best probably within the industry. That is, especially for a facility of this nature, where we do not have an actually gas collection system where we can, with reason, to know for sure exactly what the flow is. they have a pretty good type of commitment in the game at this point in time because they're willing to construct a system without knowing for sure exactly what the flow is going to be. We've estimated what the flow is based upon what the amount of waste has been received since the 1980s through a modeling software. Again, those are modeling software. There's going to be some errors. So again, they do have quite a bit of skin in the game, willing to come up with this type of capital cost. And that's simply what you don't see with, because most of the developers want to come in after the gas system's been installed, so they know for sure exactly what the flow rate is and what the gas composition is.
Cool.
What is your flow rate that you're basing your pro formas on?
So we're currently everything's on 870 SCFM of raw biogas. So when you start considering the math equation from there, you probably take a 50% haircut, and then you're anywhere between 450 to 500 SCFM of pipeline gas. We believe that with optimization of the well field, of knowing each individual well, which one to tune up and tune out, with increased gas that would be increased municipal solid waste coming in between now and when the project goes in service. That's the safe assumption that we base our modeling is 875 to, with an increase of up to 1,000 within the first 3 years of service.
What kind of deal is ONEOK giving you?
Yeah, ONEOK's participation is actually, Spark would be paying them for the interconnection. So as part of our pro forma, we're investing as part of the capital cost interconnect. So we're tying into their system, and as part of that, we're writing them a check. They're like any other industrial use that needs to tie into their system. They have interconnection requirements. They have something that Wade mentioned. We have to meet the gas quality that's pretty stated in the tariff of oxygen levels, nitrogen levels, CO2 levels, all those things is what our technology has to meet. In the event we do not meet that, then that gas is having to be flared. So we're incentivized to make sure we're always meeting the pipeline spec of that gas.
Maybe you didn't understand my question. Or is your gas price going to be fluctuating market, or are they going to give you a fixed fee contract?
Yeah, that's still yet to be determined for us. We want to potentially use an index price approach to tying it in and pegging it to an index price that's out there versus a trailing floating price. Okay. Now, gentlemen, I think there's a couple more slides I can go through quickly here. This is a timeline, and then the last one is a summary for Wade, so I can cover this. Ideally, we're here today on the 15th. From here to February 1st, we'd like to present to you what an agreement would look like. You see that it's a measured timeline that we want to be back with you in April. The reason it's not January or February is because we're going to be analyzing the gas upgrading technology. We're going to be ensuring that the agreement is something that the city's comfortable agreeing to. We're going to be designing the well field. Maybe it's not 51, it's 55 wells, or maybe it's only 45 wells. There's something interesting on the design side. If we increase well spacing, then that lowers other intrusions from oxygen and nitrogen, and that's maybe better because then that means we don't have a nitrogen recovery unit on the system. So there's still some fluidity to that. But our goal with this timeline you see here is present to you the idea, tell you the story of what we intend to proceed with, work with city staff on the legal agreement, work with technology vendors on which technology pathway to take, work with the utility on the design of the system itself, so how much diameter pipe, what type of compression do we need, and then come to you by the 16th of April with a finished product to say this is what we decided on technology, on wellheads, on pipeline. So this is the timeline here. There's another page at the end that is pretty fine font. It's a Gantt chart that really looks at all the key milestones that would happen from the point of city approval. And that's something that we technically could begin the third quarter of next year. The third quarter of 2022, and a point of providing some royalty income to the city. It's a 1-year lead time, as you may know, from on gas conditioning and upgrading equipment. The easiest parts may be the collection system or the small pipeline, but the technology and upgrading is about a 1-year lead time. So we may be back here a couple more times. I'll turn it to Wade to wrap us up, and please let us know if there's any more questions.
So again, what we talked about here is trying to address the environmental compliance with GP6 and GP7 located on the south side of the property. We continue to have the methane exceedances at those two probes, primarily GP7, but occasionally GP6. We believe both of these options that we propose tonight will achieve environmental compliance. The difference between those two is option one will be at a cost to the city of approximately $223,000. The option two, which consists of a full-blown glass collection system, the landfill gas to energy project, there is no cost to the city of Enid, and also you receive a royalty for the sale of that production gas off the facility.
I have a question about that. In option one, what are you going to do with the gas? Are you going to just flare the gas off option one?
Option one, we're simply venting it to the atmosphere. We're not going to destroy it or anything through any type of flaring system.
Well, I think that suggesting that we'll get by with that very long might be short-sighted, don't you?
Absolutely, sir. It's not necessarily, which is one of the reasons why we went ahead and entertained a conversation with them and then get to the point to bring it to you. And so I think what I'll do Gerald's job now. Unless there's direction otherwise, we will proceed down this path for option two, unless you let Gerald know that you'd like to do something else. And then we will come back to you at some point in the future before we ask you to sign an agreement. We'll get the agreement to you and we'll get you some updated information and let you know how it's going.
Just make sure to add to the list of questions that financing bonding capacity issue.
Absolutely, sir.
Thank you.
And it would be helpful if they could put together a pro forma of projected production and what the real numbers are in a year or 2 years or whatever you feel comfortable with in terms of the volume of gas and the sales, the actual number, the royalty percentage and the percentage that we recognize, and we can't predict what the gas market's going to be tomorrow, much less a year from now. You're just going to have to make a stab at that. But
ready to present to you. And I think, as you know, gas is trading here at 259.1. When we presented in October, it was closer to 3, so it's something that we'll all be big fans of what the natural gas price is. But yeah, absolutely. We'll have a pro forma that'll say top line production multiplied by gas price, multiplied by what the estimated value is over a 5-year window. And knowing that in a 30-year term, natural gas could be that $8 window, or it could be the $1 window, and we'll follow that closely. But that's something that will absolutely be presented to you prior to any decision.
So tell me, this may be a little hard to know, but if the price of natural gas tanks in 5 years, if the cost of solar continues to plummet and the cost of all other, oil and gas continues to tank as solar becomes cheaper and it's not feasible for the cost to compress and sell this gas, do we still have a way to use this infrastructure to be in compliance with our with the rest of our regs?
Yes, the system, again, this is kind of two separate systems. We have an initial gas collection system on the landfill that could be utilized. It's going to be utilized for environmental compliance standpoint. Its second use is going to be to collect that gas and then pipe it to the gas generation plant there on the northeast side of the facility. So in the future, if the gas prices get to a point that is not economical for us to treat and sell that to ONEOK, yes, we do have an existing gas collection system that is separate, that has an existing flaring system on it, that we can then route that gas to the flare and destroy it through the flare.
Okay, cool.
It says we're supposed to have the deadline by February 7th. It looks like a year and a half after that before we actually get the system working. Are we optimistic that they'll extend the deadline that much?
I believe, based on our experience with DEQ, they're going to be very acceptable to it, especially with the knowing that we're going from a very minimal remedial system to a full-blown glass collection system. They've been very forthcoming with us over the last 3 or 4 years, working with them on this issue. As long as we're showing movement going forward, some positive movement, whether it be a contract or whatever that may be, yes, I believe they'll give us that variance and allow us to extend it out.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
We might mention to these fine gentlemen that there is another landfill that we have accessible just north of that one that you're looking at drilling into right now. So if you're handing out checks for digging in landfills, we've got some more.
I'll keep that in mind, sir, but I'd like to make this one a success first. Okay, we'll proceed.
Thank you.
Gerald?
Just one follow-up thing, just to clarify, as we've been working on this methane compliance problem, the city engaged SCS, and SCS actually led us to this as a possible solution. And it was interesting, when I sat in on the first meeting, I recognized Norman from a previous conversation that he and I had had, not about the landfill, but about CNG, probably a couple years ago. And so they've been around for a little while. There are two other places, I think he mentioned it, I had to step out a minute, at least, I believe, Lawton and Salisaw. And Mayor, I believe we know the mayor of Salisaw, isn't that Keith Skelton?
Yeah.
And so I will be doing some due diligence with him and with Lawton just to see, but it's my understanding they've signed up. So I'm interested to see what their situation is. And so we will do that as part of our due diligence as well.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other questions on that? Okay, item 3.2, update on ice storm cleanup. Thank you, gentlemen.
Evening, Mayor, Commission members.
Yeah.
I'm just going to try and make this a brief, make sure I noted it. Okay. This is just a brief update. Where we are now, we have TFR Enterprises who got the second contract. They're continuing to pick up trucks. They have 7 trucks. Actually, we had an 8th truck come in today. That truck is not running because it had a issue with its camshaft, but it is there and it should be available towards the end of the week. Current status of how much we've pulled is about 1,700 tons, which is a whole lot of tons for the most part. And right now we are looking at a tree trimming contract to actually capture those tree limbs that are hanging off areas and creating a potential safety hazard for residents and business around the city. So right now, when we were looking at the contract, we reasoned at $118 a ton. The current cost as of today is $243,000. I will say that we did notice that with the snow, it looked like there is a little bit of additional cost because of the weight from the snow is showing up, and we expect that to something to continue today. I haven't seen the totals from today and tomorrow with the snow that we're having right now. This map is just showing you what has been completed since December 1st when we got the new contract. All the red areas are where the current contractor TFR has actually covered and been pulling up debris and trash. The blue at the bottom was where the first contractor, Troy Brown, had went, and we're actually going to have the current contractor go there and make a second pass because we have went out and actually been looking around and seen that there's some places where maybe there was a timing issue or something else, but we do see piles of debris in some of those areas, and we are going to try and have them have a second pass. One note about that 1,700 tons, it does have to go somewhere, and we do have a big pile building up at the landfill. Our current chipper is actually down as a function of repair that the commission approved about a month and a half ago. So it just so happened that that repair is going on as we speak. We are in the process of renting a second chipper as a function of an RFP that was approved on last Wednesday. That one, just because of supply and demand, is not expected to be here until January 1st. It's actually in Hennessy, so it is proximal to the city, and it may be here sooner, but just because of time and the holidays coming up, the vendor didn't want to give us any early promises. Once that does come, we will have 2 chip grinders, and we will be able to knock out some of that pile. Because of the amount that is there at the landfill, we were concerned about space. So we actually have designated an area around the backside of the landfill. We've built another road, and that's where the contractors are going to go and start dumping debris, piles of the wood. The other thing that we are using is just essentially trying to gather as much data as possible. We put together a survey tool, a mapping tool that staff can go out and essentially drive by in kind of like a UPS fashion. We drive by a pile, take a picture, it grabs spatial data, time, and date and time data, and then we make an estimate of how big it is. Now, this is essential because we're able to take that data and those pictures and send them to either ODEM or FEMA as documentation of the piles. So we actually have at this point about 1,900 piles that we've documented out there around the city. And that's 1,900 since approximately the 1st. So once again, that does not include the initial impact of that first wave of the storm. I just got off the phone with ODM, and we're actually, we've actually merged our data with ODM's database. So every time we do a survey, they're actually going to have it in real time. So that really helps us as they start pushing that information to FEMA and helping us to meet that minimum for Garfield County. Right now, we're in really good shape. Our expectation with the holiday coming up is that we will be very close to being complete with all streets by just before the Christmas holiday. We may have a few more days to about a week right after the Christmas holiday, but those trucks are really moving fast and they're moving through town. Our expectation right now is to have them kind of do the north, do the second sweep, and then they're going to be working on a lot of the major thoroughfares like Purdue, Oxford, and then some of the north-south roads like Cleveland and other places that just haven't gotten hit. But past that, I think we're getting really close. We're moving along and we're making a lot of progress. So barring any questions?
I've noticed that as I've driven through some of the neighborhoods that a lot of the people, instead of just trimming up their trees, they've decided to take the whole trees down. And I'm seeing some massive stumps out there. I mean, pieces of trees that are 2 foot tall, and I don't know what the diameter is, pretty large. So obviously you can't put that through a chipper. And it's probably also driving a lot of weight, isn't it? Where we're removing entire trees now?
Yeah, I think some people, for lack of a better term, have taken advantage of the situation to do a little bit of extra landscaping. But I think that's just the nature of this situation. When I was driving through Edmond last week visiting my parents, I saw something very similar at their drop-off site. And people are just dropping off really big things or they're storing big things. So I think we just kind of have to take the good with the bad and take everything that we can at this point.
So the large trunks that can't go through a chipper.
The large ones, actually our chipper, even though it's rated for, I think up to about 29 inches, it takes a lot of stuff.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it'll take a really big tree. And what I've seen them do is sometimes they'll cut them down before they put them in. But our chipper, it grinds just about anything up.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right.
I mean, it will take a very big tree to not go through there.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any, I remember it's been several years ago, we had a fire at the landfill the summer following one of these big ice storm events where we had the piles of wood chips, heated up to such an extent in the middle that one of them was smoldering for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
What do we do? What do we do now to prevent that happening come July?
Well, that's just going to be a function of the composting process. It's really not a function of July versus any other time. Inside of those piles, there's biological material going on. And if you just get the right mixture, the biological heat will get overtaken by chemical heat. And that's really just a function of us managing those piles and moving them around to make sure they don't get too hot. But sometimes the piles will get hot enough to start to smolder. And we've seen that before. Typically what you're going to do when those things start to smolder is just let them smolder. They're just going to burn down. I mean, it's not going to take off. They're just going to burn themselves into ash over a long period of time. It's funny because where I used to work, we had the same situation and you just kind of have to let them go. I will say that we do want to make sure that we get the piles down from the things that are like 20 feet high right now, because we don't want that to start a fire. But our goal will be probably over the next month after we get the two chippers in to just spend time daily just chipping all those down to minimize that size.
Great, thank you.
I have one other comment. I think it was Friday. They were picking up debris in my neighborhood and your guys were doing it. And you had two of the city trucks out there?
We have 3 city trucks that are working, that have been
Are they
working
working
since the start.
continuously too with the contractors?
Yes, sir. They've actually been putting in significant amounts of overtime.
Okay.
As of this week, we're actually knocking them down so they don't have to do overtime.
It looks like you're making good progress.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
All righty, appreciate it. Good job. All right, that's all we had for study session. So we'll take a break here, adjourn, and meet back here at 6:30.
Hey, Mayor, we'd like to take a group photo now if we could during the break before everybody disperses a bit for the.
Sure. Line up for class pictures.